Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So I know it's been a bit since our last video. Ellen and I both got a little bit sick this week. Nothing serious, but yeah, we were a bit sick, so for a few days there we're just trying to recover. And then currently we're finishing up our university degrees. We have, whatever's left of final exams and final assignments now that everything's remote. But yeah, that's why we've been a bit slow to upload. We're gonna start speeding things back up again, but just wanted to let you know that. Now, I do want to shout out our Twitter and our Instagram. If you're not already, consider following us over there, as well as supporting us on Patreon. We'll have a special announcement about that at the end of the video. I also want to shout out our latest patrons, Jonathan English, Rip City Baseworks, and Wade Penner. Thanks so much for supporting us, guys. We really appreciate it. And again, there will be a special announcement about our Patreon at the end of the video. Now, today's topic is: what can Vancouver's transit learn from Toronto and the Greater Toronto area? Now, I previously made a video talking about why I think Vancouver has probably the best transit network in Canada, but there's definitely things Toronto does better, and so I wanted to point those out in this video. So, without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing I think Toronto does so much better than Greater Vancouver is frequent and extensive night service. If you look at the Metro Vancouver night network, it's just really pitiful. There's good service in Vancouver, I guess you could say, and there is some service to the edges of the suburbs, but really, I'd like to see a far more extensive network, particularly south of the Fraser. Currently, the night bus, the N19, only travels to Surrey Central, which, well, it is a growing hub. Surrey Central just does not have a large proportion of Surrey's overall population, and so seeing night buses travel down King George and Fraser Highway, as well as potentially east along the Highway 1/104th corridor, would be really good, because I think you could pick up a lot more of the riders in the south of Fraser region. Again, south of the Fraser, there's around 700,000 people plus. And so picking up a lot more of those riders would mean a lot better night ridership potentially, and just covering more of the region. The 321 bus, for example, and the 501 bus that travels on Fraser Highway, those would be good candidates to get night service, in my personal opinion. I also really believe that the rapid bus services should operate in a limited form at night. So if you have rapid bus on a corridor, perhaps run a local bus service on that same corridor during the nighttime to still provide some level of bus service. Next up, I want to talk about bus terminals. Now, in Metro Vancouver, we are blessed with quite nice weather year-round, and so we don't really have to think about things like path networks under the ground to keep people warm in the winter, and underground bus terminals, and etc. But I do think that there is a benefit to having weather-protected terminals compared to what we have typically, which is bus loops and on-street stops. I don't necessarily think that every location and hub needs to have a bus terminal, but you could improve existing bus loops in a huge way just by removing the kind of several shelters approach, and then just building a small glass-walled building with lots of windows, such that you basically have an inside waiting area. You could potentially have like a single staff member who could help passengers with directions, buying fares, that sort of thing, as well as, kind of providing a sense of security for the area, as well as providing washrooms, some seating areas, screens talking about when your next bus is coming, particularly because some of the routes serving different bus loops around the region are quite infrequent. So having a nice place to wait if your bus is an hourly or half-hourly service is just a nice service to provide. Plus, when it's raining, it's just miserable. Even if you have a bus shelter at a busy location like a bus loop, it just sucks. If you get space under the shelter, you're crammed in, you're still probably wet, you can't really take off your jacket and spread out a bit. And so just having a nice enclosed building at a lot of these minor hubs and terminals could make a lot of sense. And then where you have big terminals, just scale things up. And then in the dense locations, perhaps we should consider something like an underground bus terminal. An area like Surrey Central, where I know buses are planned to kind of move onto city streets, kind of new city streets that are built, I think that could be a location where it makes sense to build potentially an underground bus terminal. There's lots of new construction happening, and so what you could do is say to a condo or a building that's being developed in the core area, ideally, when the North Story Rec Center, for example, is redeveloped, you could say, hey, as part of this project, let's build a small underground bus terminal with, maybe a certain number of bays, and then, move things underground. And that's a good approach to take around different locations. As you see in Toronto, locations like York Mills and Union Station have basically upgraded and put their bus terminals into an enclosed space as the surrounding areas have been developed, and that's a great model for Metro Vancouver as well. Next up is regional bus service. Toronto has really interesting kind of network of bus services. I don't necessarily think the way the city bus services commingle is great, i.e. the TTC basically has to stop for the most part at Toronto boundaries. And this leaves you with this really strong border around each municipality that basically says local transit can't really cross municipal boundaries. It does in certain cases, but it's just not ideal network-wise. And so what Toronto has developed is this kind of regional network of GO buses. Now, Vancouver kind of already has something of this sort with the Express Series buses that largely run on kind of highways or lower tier highway style roads like Highway 10 and the like. The benefit of these type of routes is that they operate really quickly, high average operating speeds, often competitive with something like rapid transit. In Toronto, they operate with coach and double-decker buses, so much more comfortable buses for longer routes. And so I think that routes like this need to be expanded in Vancouver. While I do like the commuter-oriented routes like the 351 and 555 service on Highway 99 and Highway 1 respectively, I think what would be great to see is more long-distance buses in these, double-decker and coach-style buses, servicing routes between major hubs. So for example, you might want to see a service between White Rock or South Surrey Park and Ride and Surrey Central with only 3 or 4 stops in a coach or double-decker style bus that's just a lot faster than existing services. And such regional services that are operating faster can operate a little less frequently because, again, the time benefit of this faster service means that you still can get a faster journey time even if the bus is a little less frequent. But again, this is something that goes really well with those improved terminals that let people just kind of sit down and spread out while they wait for their bus. The next thing goes without saying, better commuter rail. Toronto has pretty much done commuter rail the best of any city outside of maybe New York and Philadelphia in North America, and that's because it's really consistently been upgrading and buying up tracks from freight companies and converting them into high quality commuter and now regional rail services. Vancouver has long kind of moved around doing commuter rail service with the excuse that, the freight companies need it because there's super high demand at our different ports and we just could not get some time on the track. The reality is that it's always possible to build more track. You can always negotiate with freight companies. There's always a price that they're willing to negotiate with. And again, originally Canadian taxpayers and the Canadian government built a lot of these railways and owned a lot of these railways. So there's always some room for the government to step in and say, we need some commuter rail. So I think that increased commuter rail, whether that looks like a better West Coast Express service or potentially new routes, is something Vancouver really needs to consider. We have a weird mix of transportation options currently in Metro Vancouver, and I think improving our long distance regional connections has kind of been a theme of this video, and I think it's something Toronto does very well. Next up, now this is probably going to be very controversial, and again, I'm not a huge fan of cars, but I do think that at places like Park and Rides, it's not necessarily a terrible idea to consider adding parkades. For example, some locations like Carvolf Exchange and the South Surrey Park and Ride are areas that consistently are filling up with cars, and providing a high quality parking garage just provides a little more comfort to automobile drivers who want to leave their car at home and keep cars out of the core areas of the region, which is, I think, a huge benefit to everyone. In addition, something Toronto has done really well is integrating improved station amenities into a parkade. So when you build a big parkade, you add into the lower level some nice waiting areas and bike lockers and the sort, and kind of make it a bit more of a mobility hub and less of a kind of shrine to cars. And so I think that parkades can make sense here and there, especially some other key locations like termini of SkyTrain lines and the like. They're just good locations, especially if there's open land nearby where you can add a ton of ridership and potentially just make it a routine for people who wouldn't necessarily traditionally take transit. Now, my final point is streetcars and light rail. Now, I know that they're controversial, but I definitely think there are some places where streetcars and light rail make sense as an intermediate between buses and full heavy rail, especially in places where we already have rail corridors like Arbutus. So seeing something like a lot of the Toronto-style LRT lines that are being constructed, or the various streetcar lines that are already operational in Toronto would be great. I think that streetcars have a place in Vancouver. Seattle and Portland both have streetcar lines, and I think Vancouver can, as usual, show those cities how to do transit properly and build really successful streetcar systems with frequent service and full compass integration. Thanks for watching the video, guys. We're gonna try to be, as I said, getting back to our normal upload schedule. Now, a quick talk about something we're doing for Patreon. Recently, we had the idea of creating a faux metro map in the style of like the classic London Tube map, with each of our patrons getting to choose a station location. So if you're new to Patreon or you're considering becoming a patron, that's a project we're going to be doing. We've already reached out to all of our current patrons, but if you don't necessarily get those emails, etc., feel free to send us a message and tell us what you want us to name your station. We're going to be using it for the end screen and the cover photo on our Patreon, so it should be a lot of fun. I also want to give a huge shout out to our patron and friend Jordan. He's helped us make this map. We're really not experts with vector art and that sort of thing, and so thanks so much, Jordan, for helping us out making this map. We appreciate it a ton. Again, thanks to all of our patrons, thanks to all of our viewers, and have a nice night.